Well, good evening, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary, where the whole household of God is welcomed and wanted. Good to see everybody joining us tonight. Had a little bit of rain today. Give thanks for it. It's washing a little pollen away, maybe less sneezes. Isn't it interesting now in our COVID reality that when somebody sneezes, we feel like they've created a capital offense or coughs or blows their nose around us? How dare you sneeze? How dare you cough around me during COVID? Anyway, it's got to learn to take things with a grain of salt. We were very concerned, obviously, when how COVID would affect our church, and we had to make some pretty serious adjustments. And I was talking to one of our members yesterday, who's been a member for, I think, more than about 50 years, honestly. And she said, DE, we're getting a little older and my husband doesn't get around as well. And I give thanks for the virtual connection. And they come when they can. They come when their bodies feel up to it or when they feel safe to drive. But I said, hey, worship your way. Either way, we're glad you're joining us tonight virtually. Today is April 26th. It is Wednesday. We are still in the month of April, the month of transformation. If you want to grab your Fully Awake 365 devotion, we're going to begin tonight's teaching with the devotion. And I think tonight's devotion should remind you of the 1960s, something of, I believe, The Doors. The Doors, Jim Morrison wrote this song, "Break on through to the other side, break on through." If you've seen the movie Forrest Gump, that's one of the movies in the soundtrack there. We're going to talk tonight about breaking on through. Before we begin, let's grab our prayer of surrender. If you want to turn back to page 4, we'll read it together tonight. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. Break on through the month of transformation. Here we go. Here's our affirmation. I know today that the willing sacrifice of Jesus makes it possible for me to approach God for myself at any time. Wow, interesting. And so the gist of today's devotion is questioning the need for a middleman, the need for Jesus. Now that the veil is removed, is Jesus become that new veil between us and God? It's an interesting challenge for our spiritual growth tonight. According to the biblical account, the veil in the Jewish temple, or the tabernacle of Moses, separating the outer court from the Holy of Holies, was torn into at the moment of Jesus' crucifixion. And so this veil is supposedly torn into, whether it's literally or metaphorically, that there's no more separation between God and man, between that outer court, even inner court, and the Holy of Holies, where only the priests were allowed to go. Symbolically, we have come to believe that that event represents Jesus in his willingness to sacrifice himself. I love this explanation here. Thank you, Pastor LaDonna. That's a spoiler alert. Not meet a requirement for blood initiated by God the Father. Not that God requires blood, but that we did. Our minds needed reconciliation. Showing us that the system of religion we were following was man-made and founded on an idea of separation that was not based on the truth. Interesting. Jesus' finished work on the cross put an end to that idea, not the reality of separation, but the idea, the misnomer of separation, and gave every person equal access to God. Here we go. The destruction of the veil presumably happened on its own, on its own accord as the result of Jesus' willing sacrifice. Yet over 2,000 years later, we act as if he physically still stands in the temple, waiting for us to check in with him in order to get to God. I love this comparison here. But he's not there. In fact, he never was. All we have done is replace the idea of a veil separating us from God with Jesus separating us from God. Does Jesus separate us from God? Do we have to go through Jesus to get to God? If we don't walk in the door of Jesus, can we get to God? Is Jesus protecting us from God? Is God did God pour out his wrath on Jesus because God can't deal with us? And all of this religious sickness is something that we are learning to unlearn at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. He didn't have to do it. We're glad that he did. But God never required blood. So now the veil is ripped in two between the outer court and the Holy of Holies. But does Jesus stand in that space now? Interesting. When we believe this way, we make his sacrifice meaningless. He opened the door so that we could all walk in freely. But many of us still wait in the outer court for him to pick us up and carry us to God. Jesus is our transportation to God. He's done his part. Jesus has done his part. It's time for us to do ours and break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. All right, let's grab our prayer tonight together. Christ consciousness, or the Christ conscious mind. Help me to understand that there is no separation between me and God. Amen. Great devotion today. Thank you, Pastor LaDonna, for such a thought-provoking idea. I love that idea. And Jesus does reconnect us to God, but doesn't stand in the middle. Doesn't protect us from God. Reconnects us to God in consciousness. Looking forward to connecting with you again on Friday morning for our devotion. It's always a fun day for Friday.